All right, everybody. Welcome. Are we live? We're live. I think it's good. Say hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
I guess I'm supposed to say, welcome to Theory Underground. I'm your host, David McCarricker. Today I'm joined by Anne and Nance, or Dance. Well, Dance. I guess it's Ants when it's Anne and Nance, and then it's Dance when it's the three of us because you add the name, you add the D in there. My dad was the one who realized that.
Wow.
When we were on tour, he was like, "It's Dance." But it's also Ryan. It's also Caesar's in the chat.
Ryan climbing across my laptop all the time. Can't stop it.
Yeah, and it's also Caesar in the chat. And so welcome Caesar in the chat. Welcome people who are joining from the YouTube side. Welcome people who are on the website joining in the future. Great to have you all here today. Today's going to be a really fun one, I think. This book is called The Comfort Crisis. Anne, would you like to say a couple things? Shout out to your sister, like how we heard about this book, etc.
Yeah, my sister just ran a marathon this year. And then at the same time, Dave and I have been having like conversations about being comfortable and like comfortability culture in America. And actually we were just in an academic meeting yesterday about a classroom, and the word comfort and comfortability was used more times than it should have been. I think, we want people to be comfortable in a classroom, but the way that we talk about comfort right now in like American society and all aspects of it for like grown adults, I think it's too much. And so I was on the phone with my sister, and we're planning on running a big relay race together in the spring. And it just got to talking about comfort, and she said, "Anne, I've got this book recommendation for you and Dave. It's called The Comfort Crisis. And it's about, embracing discomfort and the problem with just being comfortable and happy and content and settled all the time." And I said, "Oh my gosh, Dave and I have been talking about this." So it was a good fit. And here we are.
Yeah, Nance, you've got some thoughts going, and what would you like to say?
I do think this book is a gem. I like we've been saying, I can't think of anybody in my life that I wouldn't recommend this book to. It's great. I'm looking forward to adding to this conversation, and like a lot of the stuff that we've already been doing and talking about and thinking about runs along these lines. And like some of the moments in the book, I was like, oh wow, it's kind of uncanny. Like those are things I've heard Dave say. Those are things I've heard Ann say. Those are things I've myself have said. So it's a great book. It's written for mass appeal. It's not necessarily my favorite style of writing, but it's a short enough book to read, and I think everybody should read it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I was listening to it at Amazon last week, because when people give me book recommendations, if they've read a book that I put them onto, then I'll usually listen to a book that they put me onto. What I don't like is when people are cold called dropping me recommendations, like, because that's some parasocial bullshit. There's no like symbolic exchange there, at least from my standpoint. I guess there's a way that it could be, but anyway, what I wanted to say about this book is that it fits into the sort of genre of popular psychology, popular sociology, popular philosophy, aka on Amazon the actual category is called social philosophy, as well as, honestly, I would kind of throw it in there with self-help, business success, and fucking how to be woke. Like, now, I wouldn't say that this is like, now, obviously when I say how to be woke, that's more like Robin DiAngelo, Kimber Max Kendi, right? And we got our problems with them. But like even like a book like what is it, Robin Kilmer or whatever with her Braiding Sweetgrass, that's that kind of book as well. Basically, these are authors who are not writing to an academic theory audience. They're just not. And I think that's okay. In fact, I think it's great. I think that people who are writing to an academic theory audience are doing themselves a disservice if they're not also writing popular works. Like, I think you actually have to do both. And the reason I say that is because I think at some level, some kind of dialectical approach to any subject matter is necessary. And that includes the audience itself. And so it's like, if you're in high theory zone all the time and you're not like engaging with common sense, you can say you're doing a critique of common sense, which is to say doxa, but are you really? Because like what? Are you just talking about the people who say shit in your life that annoy you? Like, okay, like Judith Butler. Does Judith Butler actually engage with American common sense? Or does she only engage with like her imaginary idea of American common sense? Like where does her American common sense that she critically engages with like actually come from? We don't know. There's no sources for that. She's got no sources for that. Well, we do things a little different at Theory Underground. And so for the last 5 months, we've been doing the critical media theory research cohort because we've got our own research unit at Theory Underground. And we kind of consider ourselves to be not pioneers. The pioneers have come before us for the last 100 years or so. But we're helping like make sense of the emerging field of critical media theory, which is sort of, I always just kind of as a shorthand say this is like basically from Marx to McLuhan as like the founding fathers, Baudrillard as the bastard son, and we're the lost children who are trying to piece together the pieces that they've left us and make sense of our own lives. Now, we do that reading all kinds of great thinkers, geniuses from world history, especially from the last couple hundred years when it concerns critical media theory. But we also pair those with pop sociology, pop psychology, and even business success books. Like we read Pitch Anything by Olin Klaff or whatever. Klaff. Terrible book. Really, really good for like learning how to manipulate people. And it is kind of, we paired it with Edward Bernays, right? The father of advertising and propaganda, paired with just a contemporary like, hey, people have a reptilian brain that you can hack by manipulating them using frame warfare, right? So that was 1 month. But like other months, for instance, we paired Sherry Turkle's Reclaiming Conversation, a bestseller, popular book about smartphone addiction and people feeling super alienated in this day and age. What do we pair that with? I don't even remember off the top of my head.
Arendt.
Hannah Arendt. And that's not contrived either. She's actually in dialogue with Arendt because Sherry Turkle's based. But this is not something you'll find anywhere else on the internet. It's not something you'll find in any academic classroom. Most of what you'll find in academic classrooms is teachers moving away from books altogether. The ones who do teach books read classics, and that's about it. As opposed to, you might take a level 400 sociology class, and then they're reading like teen fiction, right? That was Anne's experience. And so, there's nothing wrong with reading a teen fiction that contemporarizes, or however you would say that, makes contemporary a subject matter, right? But you got to pair that with theory. So that's what we're doing. And so now we're going to dive in to the comfort crisis as a sort of first public facing thing we do with critical doxology. So welcome everybody to the first thing that we do with that. Anne and myself, we are co-instructors for the CMT research cohort. It's about to finish out the 6th month, and then next year begins the second phase of the lectures. For the next several months, though, we'll still be meeting, and students will be presenting their thoughts. So that's news to everybody because I just told you all, but it's something I've been working out and thinking about. Yeah, even Anne, it's news to her. But like, no, it's like we still want to have like the discussions, and we want to give people like Nance an opportunity to continue practicing public speaking. And we also want to like write for one another and our future audience, because there will be a critical media theory or CMT anthology to come, right? Okay. So get involved with the CMT research cohort. It meets every second Sunday of every month. And the way to access that is either through the scholarship, which is pretty easy to get your hands on, or just sign up at Tier 1 on the app. That'll get you in. Let's get into it. Nance, if you want to start reading, and then then Ann will go, and then I'll go. But that gives me a chance to, I got to eat some food real quick.
Cool. Chapter 1, 33 days. I'm standing on a windy tarmac in Kotzebue, Alaska, a 3,000 person village 20 miles above the Arctic Circle on the Chukchi Sea. In front of me are 2 airplanes. One will soon dump me deep into the Alaskan Arctic, a place that's generally agreed to be one of the loneliest, most remote, and most hostile on Earth. I'm on edge. This impending voyage into the Arctic is one thing, but I'm also no fan of flying, particularly when it's in planes like these, single-engine 2- and 4-seater bush aircraft. Picture empty Campbell's soup cans with wings. Donnie Vincent senses my nerves. He's a backcountry bow hunter and documentary filmmaker on this expedition with me. He sidles up to my shoulder, leans in, and lowers his voice. Most of the pilots up here are whiskey-swilling cowboy mountain men, the type of guys who don't think twice about getting into a bar fight, he says over the freezing gusts. But just so you know, I booked the absolute best pilot I could. Brian is Top Gun. I nod thanks. I'm not telling you we're not going to crash and die, Donnie continues. That is a real risk, okay? But this guy is good, so the odds that we'll be in a plane crash are... My edginess amplifies into existential dread as I cut him off. Okay, I say. Got it. Commercial flying is incredibly safe. The statistics say you're infinitely more likely to die in a crash on the way to the airport than you are in the plane. But this rule does not apply to bush plane flights in Alaska. About 100 of these flights a year end in fire and brimstone, and the FAA recently released an unprecedented warning to Alaskan bush plane pilots after a spike in accidents. This year has been particularly bad. Fierce weather and thick fog and wildfire smoke have been messing with visibility. Donnie tells me that Brian has a colleague named Mike who recently crashed after misreading the weather. Mike was lucky enough to walk away, but the plane had to be rebuilt. Once Brian drops us in the Arctic backcountry, we'll face more dangers. Furious grizzlies, 1,500-pound moose, packs of flesh-craving wolves, wild-eyed wolverines, blood-addicted badgers, raging glacial rivers, violent whiteout snowstorms, sub-zero temperatures, hurricane-force winds, precipitous cliffs, deadly diseases with names like tularemia and hantavirus, swarming mosquitoes, swarming mice, swarming rats, the runs, the barfs, the bleeds. There might be 1 million ways to die in the West, but there are 2 million in the Alaskan backcountry. Our only way out? We'll trudge hundreds of miles across that rugged world until Brian picks us up in 33 days' time. Along the way, we'll be searching for a mythical herd of caribou, a migrating army of 400-pound ghosts that silently roam the Arctic tundra, their gnarled, 4-foot antlers emerging from the crystalline fog only to disappear when the wind shifts. The coming 5 weeks are an all-in proposition. Unlike, say, hiking the Pacific Crest or the Appalachian Trail, Deep in the Alaskan backcountry, you can't decide you're too cold and hungry to wander a couple miles off trail to a highway where you can Uber to the nearest diner for a hot cup of coffee and a stack of flapjacks. There are few, if any, trails. And the closest road, town, point of cell reception, and hospital can be hundreds of miles away. Hell, even death may not be a way out. My insurance policy, unfortunately, does not offer remotely located corpse recovery coverage. None of this sounds anything like my safe, comfortable life at home. And that's the point. Most people today rarely step outside their comfort zones. We are living progressively sheltered, sterile, temperature-controlled, overfed, under-challenged, safety-netted lives. And it's limiting the degree to which we experience our one wild and precipitous life, as poet Mary Oliver put it. But a radical new body of evidence shows that people are at their best, physically harder, mentally tougher, and spiritually sounder after experiencing the same discomforts our early ancestors were exposed to every day. Scientists are finding that certain discomforts protect us from physical and psychological problems like obesity, heart disease, cancers, diabetes, depression, and anxiety, and even more fundamental issues like feeling a lack of meaning and purpose. There are plenty of, let's say, less committed ways to gain the benefits of discomfort, stuff a person could easily fold into their daily life to improve their mind, body, and spirit. But this trip is at the extreme end of a prescription that researchers across disciplines say we should make a part of our lives. It's part rewilding, part rewriting, and its benefits are all-encompassing. Brian, Donnie, William Altman, who is Donnie's lifelong cinematographer, and I are outside the Connex shipping container that acts as RAM Aviation's base of operations at Kotzebue's local airport. We're all organizing gear and trying to keep our faces out of the ballistic wind, which is shuttling more salty fog from the sea across the land and into the hazy gray mountains. Let's load up and go before that fog gets worse, says Brian. Donnie used to spend 6 months at a time in the Alaskan backcountry as a biologist for the Fish and Wildlife Service. He lived out of a yellow North Face tent that he describes as a big yellow gumdrop. He's since researched, hunted, and filmed in some of the most extreme and remote locations on Earth. The guy one summer, no kidding, lived among a pack of wolves as he studied salmon on the Tulukkask River in the Yukon Delta. William has been with Donnie on nearly every hunt and is a rare breed of 20-something who parties like it's 1899. He spent most of the last decade in an internet and running water free 8-foot by 8-foot cabin in the Maine backwoods. The kid primarily lives on the food he hunts, raises, and grows himself. The accompaniment of these guys eases my apprehension, but only sort of, because the thing about nature is that it's unpredictable and unforgiving. It doesn't care about your experience and what happened the last time you visited it. Nature can always throw rougher stuff at you. Meaner animals, taller cliffs, lower temperatures, wider rivers, and more snow, rain, wind, and sleet. Donnie and William are often reminded of this harrowing reality. They once ran out of food and nearly starved and froze when whiteout storms caused their pickup plane to arrive 4 days late. Another time, they had to shoot a charging locomotive-sized grizzly that would have rearranged their internal organs. By dumb luck, the shot ricocheted off the bear's skull, knocking him out cold. I grab my 80-pound backpack, which carries most everything I'll need to survive over the next month. Layers of clothing, food, emergency medical kit, etc. Brian stops me as I'm lugging the bag over to his plane. You and William are in that one, he says, pointing to a freshly painted green and gold 4-seater Cessna. We muscle our packs into the plane's hull, and I step up into its passenger door and contort myself into its back seat. My knees are jammed up into my throat back here. Donnie and Brian hop into the other plane. It circles the runway and takes off toward the fog as William and I sit waiting in the Cessna. And here comes our pilot. He's young, with a ball cap over a high and tight haircut. Aviator sunglasses. He struts up and slithers into the pilot's seat, reaches out a gloved hand for a shake. Hi, he says, I'm your pilot, Mike. William peers back at me with a twisted grin. Wait, I think. Is this the same mic that crashed his plane? The propeller kicks, stoking decibels that drown out my inner scream.
Cool. Chapter 2, 35, 55, or 75. I come from a long line of men who seem to run on booze, bullshit, and self-serving chaos. I'm gonna put these back on real quick.
Okay, Zoom. I get it. Give me a message. My father, who disappeared while I was in the womb, once got drunk on St. Patrick's Day, painted his horse green, and rode it into a bar with a woman who was not my mother. An uncle once spent a night in a dry-out cell screaming, for reasons unknown to him, and everyone in that particular correctional facility on that particular Tuesday night. Your mom fucks Volkswagens. A cousin once came to in the county jail and found that he'd blacked out into an impromptu family reunion. The police had thrown him into a cell with one of my uncles. Yet another uncle is a frequent drop-in at the Idaho State Prison, and my grandfather roundly agreed to be the most charming and handsome liar, cheat, and drunk in Ada County. Wow, that's where we live. Nearly a decade ago, I found myself riding that same family horse. There were a couple of dude, where's my car moments, some broken bones and bent relationships, and I was once arrested during an intoxicated attempt to break the land speed record on a collapsible scooter. I was also something of a professional hypocrite. I had an enviable career at a glossy magazine as a health journalist, dispensing advice on how to live a better life. I was good at the job, but I wasn't exactly living the wisdom I wrote. Most of my mental energy was spent toggling back and forth between being drunk and obsessing over the next drink. Nearly everything in my life deferred to alcohol. If I wasn't drinking, I was running out the clock until the weekend, when I'd drink again. This practice made my life a fast-moving fog, and I lost years in a cycle of weekend binging. I'd marked Monday to Friday from hangover to swearing off booze, to recovery, to convincing myself that this time it would be different, to being shit-faced again. Alcohol was my comfort blanket. It killed the stress around my job. It quickly ended boredom. It numbed me to sadness, anxiety, and fear. It covered me from what was uncomfortable, the insecurities, situations, thoughts, and emotions that are just part of being a human. Then, at 28, I awoke one morning soaked in misery and whiskey-tinged vomit. It was the second morning like that in a row, and I'd had plenty like it before. But this time around, I experienced one of those moments I didn't understand at the time, except that I knew something big was happening. I experienced clarity, a state that was at the time about as familiar to me as particle physics. I could see my life as it was and not as I believed it to be. I was a tongue-chewing idiot drunk and a career fraud, and everything around me was a damn mess that was only getting messier with each ensuing weekend. I could see that I'd soon be found out and lose my job. Next would be my relationships, because being around me while I was drinking was fun until it wasn't, which usually occurred sometime after the fifth drink. Then would go my possessions, car, house, etc. Eventually, I'd lose my life. Whether I'd die at 35, 55, or 75, I didn't know. I just knew that my drinking habit was going to end me early. People who say things like, let's finish these beers and then ride those ATVs, aren't exactly models of longevity. Comfort from alcohol was not only numbing me to the life I wanted to live, it was also killing me. I saw a choice. Option 1, do nothing. Was it? Sorry, someone's at the door. Okay. I don't know, you drove.
It's the person who wants to buy the thing from Craigslist or whatever.
Oh.
Or Facebook Market.
Sorry, 1 second. Okay. Or option 2, Okay, I'll start again. I saw a choice. Option 1, do nothing. Cling to complacency and the numbing lifestyle that would ultimately end badly, but allow me to keep drinking. All evidence until then suggested that nothing fixes a problem like the first drink. Or option 2, get uncomfortable. Ditch my liquid comfort blanket. I hadn't a clue where this second route would take me or if I could even pull it off. Dave, the keys are in our room, I just remembered. Oh, you can hear me on the I'm like yelling. Sorry. Ditch my liquid comfort blanket. I hadn't a clue where the second route would take me or if I could even pull it off. And I was terrified. But the funny thing about waking up covered in your own stomach contents is that it makes doing the exact opposite of whatever got you there an easier decision to make. No one gets sober on a Friday evening. It's a Sunday morning coming down kind of a decision. I raised the white flag. This is when the discomfort started. The acute physical hell of drying out lasted for days. There were headaches, nausea, exhaustion, the shakes, the sweats, and other internal hells. My lungs began kicking up what I can only imagine was some kind of carcinogen cocktail, because I had a habit of chasing drinks with Marlboros. The physical stuff eventually faded between the line of perception. But then the even bigger challenge of sobriety started, dealing with my frenetic thoughts as my booze-altered brain began to rewire itself. My mind was like a hard rubber ball shot from a cannon into a concrete room. It existed in a high-grade state of mania and bounced from joy that I was alive, to depression that I got here, to terrifying question after terrifying question about my new way of life. How do I not drink? What do I do on weekends? What should I say if I'm at a social event and someone asks me if I want a drink? How will I reconnect with my old friends at college reunions and weddings? It turns out the answer to those questions are don't drink. Anything but drinking. No thanks, and why don't you cross that bridge when you come to it, bud? I understand the simplicity now, but at the time these were profound, baffling questions, like asking a toddler to solve for X. It comes as no shock to me that half of people admitted to mental health institutions suffer from substance abuse disorders. I required a relearning of life and how to live it. And there were generations of whiskey-bent, hell-bound, Easter family chromosomes fighting this new path. These types of genes are coded to make you believe that the solution is a smoky barroom with a jukebox that plays George Jones and that things will go right this round despite hundreds of examples of evidence to the contrary. But day by day, I embraced the raw discomfort of hard change, and soon the world opened up. I became aware of the beauty of being alive and better understood my role. Before sobriety, for example, all signs seemed to indicate that I was the absolute center of the universe. But upon drying out, I realized that I'm just not that damn important in the grand scheme of things. This is a deeply unnerving recognition. But once I started to act on it, admitting that I don't know things and that I could use some help, I gained some peace and perspective. I began connecting with the people I love in new, deeper ways. I started to find silence, experience calm, and feel okay with myself. To get out of myself, I got a dog and each morning took him to a nearby river where I felt a long forgotten peace and confidence in the 5 a.m. quiet and mist. I became less flustered by everyday problems like work dramas, traffic jams, deadlines, and bills. I wasn't a completely new person, and I'd never be confused with Mr. Rogers. But I was more aware, which allowed me to see that I was still surrounded in comfort. I was marinating in the stuff. Except that these were less acutely destructive, but potentially more insidious forms of it. I just had to take a look at my everyday life. I was comfortable, quite literally, every single moment. I awoke in a soft bed in a temperature-controlled home. I commuted to work in a pickup with all the conveniences of a luxury sedan. I killed any semblance of boredom with my smartphone. I sat in an ergonomic desk chair staring at a screen all day, working with my mind and not my body. When I arrived home from work, I filled my face with no effort. Highly caloric foods that came from Lord knows where. Then I plopped down on my overstuffed sofa to binge on television streamed down from outer space. I rarely, if ever, felt the sensation of discomfort. The most physically uncomfortable thing I did, exercise, was executed inside an air-conditioned building as I watched cable news channels that are increasingly bent on confirming my worldview rather than challenging it. I wouldn't run outside unless the conditions were, well, comfortable, neither too hot, too cold, nor too wet. What would cleansing myself of all these other comforts do for me?
I'm back.
He's back.
We sold the little pet baby carriage that we were gifted at the wedding because now that Ryan's bigger and harness trained, we don't need it. So, and we can go to Boise Fry Co. That's date money. Okay. Before we read on, this is not an audiobook. We're not just live streaming the reading of an audiobook. We highly recommend that you buy a copy of this book, read it, and then gift it to somebody who you care about, who's too comfortable. Which is probably everybody you know, except that working class people like Caesar, who's listening from work right now here in the Zoom chat because this is a hub event. Your life is not comfortable while you're at work, probably, right? There's a kind of discomfort you're getting paid to bear, right? I work at Amazon. Anne works at Amazon. It's not comfortable there. They have made it as ergonomic and inclusive as any place can possibly be. But it's not comfortable to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning to get ready for work. That's at least my personal experience. And what's probably the discomforting part of your job?
8+ hours on my feet. I got comfortable shoes. By that third day, my feet hurt when I'm lying in bed at 2 a.m. trying to fall asleep. They're like throbbing. So there's like the physical discomfort of the job.
Okay. So there's discomfort that comes with the job. And we put up with it for quite a while. And then when we get home, we're exhausted and we have what I call in my time energy book, garbage time. Okay. Garbage time is time that doesn't have energy, right? You're just exhausted. You can just lay there, but you're not tired yet. And worse, you feel like this rebellious need to get your life back. And I say it's rebellious because you need to go to bed. The big other is saying go to bed, but the superego is saying, no, scroll on your phone. You deserve a little bit of time. You deserve this. Right? This is you time. And of course, like in a certain sense, it's true. It's just that screen time before bed is really bad for our health. It's really bad for our circadian rhythm. Last night was the first night that Anne and I were good at about like our commitment to actually not be on our screens for 2 hours before bed, right? And that was hard. And I caught Anne cheating for a second. And she's like, I got to reply to somebody. And she knew as she said it that it didn't mean anything. She made this face like, you know. But we turned our phones off and we read books and then we had a really great conversation. And then we fell asleep and we had better sleep than normal, right? And so there's this interesting tension between the truth that our jobs are a kind of coerced discomfort and necessary for our survival. But at the same time, we're still too comfortable because the legitimation narrative of a job-centric culture is consumerism. And so we feel like, well, now that I'm off work, I deserve to be a consumer. I deserve it. But it's a curse. Most of the ways that we consume are curses. We're hexing ourselves on these devices.
Like a couple weeks ago that really got us talking about this was when I was on the couch and the weighted blanket was on me and Dave's like, come on, get up. And I was like, I can't, I'm too comfortable. It's a prison. I said something like that, and then that really started us on this.
Yep. And I made a meme of it too. And it goes with a little expansion pack I've put on my understanding of Lacanian theory. And I've been playing with it for a while. But saying comfort is a prison made so many of those dots connect, right? I've been like, for the last couple of years, I just keep thinking, you know, Lacan, he's got like these comfortable middle class, upper class, like Parisian neurotics on his couch. And what he's analyzing his entire life is basically death drive and how people say they want one thing, but then they do another. And when I told Mikey about this book, his instantaneous reaction was the exact same one that I had when I was listening to it, which was, this goes really good with Lacanian theory, but also goes beyond it. Because the point is if you're always comfortable, death drive's going to be more erratic. You're going to be getting your jouissance in all these different ways. And you're going to constantly be trying to tell yourself, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. And then you'll do it, right? But if you're putting yourself into situations that are difficult, then you're giving yourself a hard time deliberately. What death drive does is it self-undermines you, usually not in a deliberate way. It's usually unconscious. But like, a good example of it at jiu-jitsu practice last night, our mentor, Eric, said that he was at a really dark place in his life when he got into jiu-jitsu. So was Mike. They both got into this, and then he said that it changed his life. He said that he used to be angry all the time. And now he said he would have road rage. And now he said, now I'm just tired. I'm exhausted. My muscles hurt because I'm always training. And he was like, I go, you know, he's on the road and he's like, yeah, go past me. Yeah, go past me. If you're getting wound up on the road, you might as well be like an old man who's like yelling at people walking past his lawn, right? It's like people are trying to live their lives. They got shit to go do, but you're so fucking wound up because you've been too comfortable, right? And so there's a really cool way that this ties into the whole death drive versus desire, jouissance versus pleasure thing that we've been talking about here for the last few years. And it ties into time energy theory because most meaningful challenges require time energy. What were you going to say, Anne?
Oh, it's like, I think in the last couple of years, we've seen the rise of like Karens. And there's just like, you know, all these videos always shared, whether it's on the news or on social media, of like mostly middle class white women throwing like full ass tantrums in public. And it's kind of, you know, funny but mean to go, haha, that person's crazy. But their life is probably so comfortable that like the moment, oh, their latte was wrong at Starbucks, or the store was out of something they need, it just like, it sets them off, and they are like so angry that they can't get this thing that they want, to the point where they're like belittling the other people and harming other people. So yeah, it's all connected, and I just think we see it a lot in American culture and society, especially. Like, I remember when we were in Mexico, and we would talk about it a lot, because everywhere in Mexico there's like all these food carts all over, just normal people who have their food cart. We're like, this is awesome, this is so cool. I wish we had this in America, where people could just start up a little food cart and sell tamales or sell tacos on the side of the road. But what did we keep saying? No, America's like a hyper sanitized litigation culture. You can't risk that potential of food poisoning. You can't risk anything like that. And so it really is like, there's all these different aspects. I think in America, in Western civilization particularly, it's just like, we are babied and coddled and so afraid of lawsuits and so afraid of getting sick, and everyone is just overly comfortable. Even like us who have, hard jobs on our feet, when we come home, we're comfortable.
Right, we flee into our friction-free zone, but I'm going to bring you back to elaborate on a perfect example. What happened to the tamale lady at your school?
Yeah, in my high school for like a year and a half, this mom of a student, or I think she was a mom of a former student at that point, would come to school every Thursday and ask all the teachers what tamales they wanted. And she would deliver them. And as we were like upperclassmen and had better, more established relationships with some of our teachers, they would let us order through them. So we'd give our teacher our order. So the teacher would be ordering like 20 tamales. And eventually the principal busted it would like blamed the tamale lady and just kicked her off of campus. And we were all so bummed. So like contrasting that with in Mexico, you can buy some grandma's tamales in front of the OXXO station for 20 pesos. It's like, I don't know where these were made, how these were made, but we'll take them.
And they're so good. And I know that like we're preaching to the choir here. Nance is like the Mexican foodie.
Yeah. Well, like growing up in the neighborhood, there was the tamale man, the tortilla lady, like going through the streets and shit. Like how ice cream men do, like how the ice cream truck would go.
Yeah.
There's also the dudes with the carts that had the homemade tortillas, homemade tamales and shit. And now living out here in the suburbs, like there's none of that. But there's some new bougie fucking chain restaurant on like every corner.
Fuck,
and they all suck.
Yeah.
They all suck too. And they're over expensive, and like the employees are miserable. The clientele are all miserable. They're all, yeah, it sucks.
It makes me think of like our homie Jorge in Aguascalientes, who had a taco truck, and he made them different than anyone else. Like he'd add a little potato, and it was a little different. He really made them with love, and he spoke really good English. Usually the taco truck guys don't speak really good English, which makes me think he probably went to college. That's usually what that means. He used to own like a wedding dress company. Like he just ran like this boutique wedding dress company. And at some point he was like, this is taking way too much out of me. So he just started the taco truck. And then he only works like, I don't know, like 5 hours every evening and has the rest of his day for his kids and stuff. And he loves it and he's happy and people come and visit him and I would come and visit him. He added me on Facebook. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not so. That's not. See, I'll punch a Marxist who says that's petty bourgeois, right? This guy's not a small Marxist, or sorry, he's not a small capitalist, is what I meant. He's not a small capitalist. He's just making he's making something useful for other people, and he's doing it with love. And I would hope he exists in any society. I hope. And the thing is we live in a society where that doesn't exist, right? There's way too many barriers to entry, and it is because of this hyper-sanitized litigation culture. And so small wonder that we're supposed to teach college students like they're, what age category would you say? Kindergartners?
I was calling them toddlers yesterday. That's another realization that came from my meeting is, so I guess without like going into too much detail,
We kind of can't,
we've got some critiques of various things that are going on at the university, which are apparent in my book, but I don't want to like name names. But so there's a course that I helped develop back in 2022. And then I was the discussion group leader of this course. So like there was a tenured professor doing the lecture session, and then I was one of the discussion leaders. And so Dave and I are going to be the discussion leaders for the same course now this coming spring. And when I first taught the course, I was going in with very much like I'm going to treat these students like they're adults and like they care, and I'm going to hold them accountable. And I quickly realized, like, no, They're not quite adults. And this meeting that we had yesterday about this class, it became very apparent to me, and especially the way that the professor had kind of changed the class in the last year. Like she's taken out, I think, some of the more rigorous readings, and she added a whole day where they just focused on mental health, and they wrote down all the things that were stressing them out and then crumpled it up in a ball and threw it across the classroom and had a rock paper scissors competition, and then they all got a little sparkly toy at the end of class.
Yeah.
In college with grown-ups. And I said to myself, I went through like all these stages of grief in this meeting and just came out the other end going, we just have to think of ourselves as preschool teachers, not
Right.
college professors or instructors. These are toddlers, and we have to treat them that way.
And it's sad because not everybody wants that, but also the people who do want it, if you don't comply, it won't go good. It won't go well for you, right? And so
they hate the class. They go, oh, it's so hard. There's so much reading and writing. I'm so stressed out. Then drop out of college. That's literally the advice I told my students at the end of my discussion group last time. I said, honestly, like if this is too much for you, if you don't really know why you're here and you feel like you're just here for a job and to party, like I would recommend dropping out of college and waiting a couple years until you're ready to take it seriously. I gave them that advice. Probably went over 90% of their heads.
Yo, Philip's in the chat. What's up, Philip? How you doing, man? Philip, you are welcome to pop in here. You'd probably want to go back and re-listen to some stuff sped up, but you can hop into the hub at any point today. We'll be going hard for a while. How much more time do we actually have for this reading? We might have to cut it off right here. We might have time for another chapter. We got something coming up.
Dialectics of Fitness time is at 11, I believe.
Okay, and
so 25 minutes from now.
All right, I think we're going to close out. So if you're watching this and you get the emails because you are registered with the website, then you are welcome to hop into the Zoom call for the rest of the hub events happening today. We have hub events that are free and open to everybody. We have hub events that are closed because they're a lot more focused and they require a lot more obsession and time and energy and commitment. And those ones usually require a lot more time and energy from me specifically, which is why there are tiers for subscribers, because ultimately I like to be paid for my labor too. I think that that's just like a normal thing we all want for now. Anyway, closing thoughts about this book. Can you scroll back to the top there, Nance, so that it's kind of like we're talking about the book now. I hope that we can come back and read more chapters of it in the future, and we'll continue to have this conversation because this is going to be sort of an ongoing conversation. I'm going to say a couple things, let you each say a couple things, and then I'll say some real closing stuff, and we'll be out of here just on time for the call with Swole. So, on the idea that we're safe, comfortable, safety netted, obviously this is kind of a contradiction because we're also uncomfortable because of all the work that we deal with. The wage labor is not fun. And if you are having fun doing wage labor, you're either an idiot who's internalized the wishes of your boss, or you're like me and you're sneaking your earbud under your bandana and you're hacking the system, right? Doing research at Amazon or whatever. Yeah, I do have fun, but it is uncomfortable to wake up at 3 a.m. because then in the afternoon I get super exhausted. I hate being exhausted in the afternoon. And it's like I can't take a 20-minuter. Like I actually need like 3 hours of sleep in the afternoon because of this fucking job. But I wanted to kind of just put something out there because I in defense of the Karens, or just really anybody who is technically comfortable, but, freaking out. We are human beings. but we don't have an outlet. Most of us don't have an outlet to be heard by the man, by whoever's in charge, because there's really actually nobody in charge, right? And it drives us crazy. And if we try to get to the bottom of some problem, we get passed off from call center to call center to call center. And the stresses we have just pile up. And these stresses are mostly not natural stresses. They're mostly constructed, and maybe by necessity in some cases. Constructions are necessary, but we go crazy like rats that are removed from nature and from the conditions for being able to have robust community. And women especially historically have always had very important roles in strong civic networks. They've always been the sort of kingpins of socialization. And they've been robbed of that by primitive accumulation has robbed them of that. The PCification, or the development of the PMC in the 20th century, robbed them of that again, right? These strong, robust civic networks. What that means is like any citizen was involved in like 15 or 20 like organizations that had like weekly, monthly, annual functions. And this was just like, there were fewer barriers to the middle class, and people had more of a rich social life. And women had very important roles in that. And that's been decimated. Like some women still have it in churches, but that's very limited. Like that's one civic network. That's not a lot, right? And so, you know, when we see them going like that, I just want to say, like, it's like fetishization to get stuck on the, oh, it's these people. They're symptomatic of this destruction of civic networks and our feelings of powerlessness in the 21st century. And this is never going to be something that Michael Easter really gets into in this book. He does get into some CMT related stuff with technology and phones, and then talks about studies, you know, brings in nature and how we're like cut off from it and blah, blah, blah. And it's all very interesting, and I will be reading it and being critical of it from our theoretical standpoint. But my closing thought is just that in the same way that I think common sense stands to gain from theory, I also think that theory stands to gain from common sense.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of problems with this book, and it's very complex. And Dave and I were kind of talking about it a little bit beforehand, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to articulate the problems that I do have with it. And I'm sure some of it's me being unfair, but there's also some places that I would like to put my foot down and actually do like a proper not even response to this book, but like, I don't know, throw my 2 cents in the conversation that this book is a part of. But I also think it's a great book, and I want people to read it. The fact that we're all we're stuck in the situations we're stuck in, and nobody has any good answers, and everything we do seems like it's just pushing us further and further into the prisons in which we find ourselves. That is true. And a radical break from the habits, from the ruts that we're all in, I think is called for. And yeah, I like, this book says basically, don't be a bitch in a really palatable way. And I think everybody needs to be told, don't be a bitch, stop being a bitch. The reasons for that and the structural conditions and all these things, like that's all stuff that I can nerd out on. But at the end of the day, it's a pat on the back, and it's done in a polite way, and it's a pat on the back and a kick in the ass at the same time, and we can all benefit from that. So
Yeah, I guess what I have to add about this book is the first two chapters that we just read, I think haven't even gotten into like the heart of the argument. Obviously, it's very much a narrative style, and I don't even think he's advocating that we should all go spend 33 days in the Arctic tundra. But I just think it's important to think about this and be confronted with it, because all of these things that we have been seeing over the last couple years, and the things that Dave and I have kind of like personally seen and experienced while traveling or being in the university, it has just like really viscerally been hitting me lately that like we're a different kind of human than humans were however many years ago. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we need to try to keep our humanness alive. And when we fall into these cycles of comfort and scrolling and forgetting and avoiding and just being little hobbits staring at colorful, bright pixels on a box, like we're losing touch with our humanness and our humanity. And so I just think this book will be a good kick in the pants paired with the CMT readings and all of the talk that we've had about, you know, being mindful of the ways in which the media manipulates us, and the 10 rules of hate in the mainstream news media, and, you know, our relationships with technology and various mediums, and our cellular devices and video games and computers. And so I like that we are reading this at Theory Underground, because it is very much popular book written by a guy who was writing, you know, self-help articles on a health website. Like, not something you would think someone who teaches Heidegger and Levinas would be advocating to read, but it just pairs so well with the conversation. And yeah, I think, like, I know Dave is wanting to do more of these classes like the CMT research cohort, where it's theory paired with these practical or popular books. And so we're reclaiming like self-help books, and I think that's really awesome. And so I'm glad that we started this one, and hopefully we get to do it again soon. But thank you all for listening, checking it out with us.
Yeah, and if you've rolled with us for a while and we know you or could get to know you over the next couple months, we are doing this relay race. It is the Reno Tahoe Odyssey. It's like 170 miles. We don't want to run that with only we don't want to run that with only 5 people. We can have up to 12 people in our.
And I think we're looking for
group.
4 more.
Okay, so we've got
my sister found, yeah.
Got a few spots, but you'd want to start running sometimes, starting now. So the relay race, also the time energy seminar, is coming up beginning January. Currently that's listed as a time energy seminar, but I'm also going to be listing that on the 4th Sunday of every month, beginning 2024, is the critical self-help theory course. And critical self-help theory is also just critical doxology. I like to call it critical doxology because it takes on a broader swath of popular works than just self-help. It takes on these business success books. It takes on these popular woke books. It takes on these popular anti-woke books like The Coddling of the American Mind. And it doesn't just take them on like, oh, let's critique this because they didn't use the word capitalism enough, which is basically what the left tube has taught people to do. Oh, they didn't say capitalism enough, so it's fetishization. It's like, oh, well, you would love the World Economic Forum. You should just go hang out with the fucking guys at Davos, like they use the word capitalism. Apparently, using the word doesn't actually change anything. People have been using the word for a long time. But if you do want to go deeper, tiers 3 and 4 at Theory Underground in the app, that'll get you into Capital Mondays with Dave and Nance, where we're reading Capital from cover to cover. And so that's been going on now for a few weeks, and it's going to be going on as long as we're doing Theory Underground, because it's a big part of the vision. And it's not just Capital. We're reading the expansion packs, the updates, the critiques, the whole thing, right? And it's not just so that we can get through it cover to cover and then be done, because as soon as it's over, we just start again. It's a way of life. It's a way of life, and showing people what you can actually do if you free up your time energy. Free it up from video games, free it up from scrolling, free it up from Netflix, binge watching, free it up from go out and run, do jujitsu, practice the violin, and critique capital. But don't just, I didn't use the word capitalism, so I don't like it. Or, oh, this is popular, so it's not going to make me smarter. No. It's just what common sense can gain from theory. Theory can gain from common sense, right? And it's not like a synthesis of the two. I think that some people could say that the time energy book I wrote here could be a synthesis of the two. I don't want it to be. The goal is to make it so that they don't go together, to cause them to short circuit, to cause them to their contradictions to become apparent, so that we can actually live them out consciously instead of unconsciously. Because right now we live out those contradictions unconsciously. All right. You can get involved with either the second Sunday or fourth Sunday events by signing up at tier 1, and you can get both at tier 2, and you can get into you can get both at tier 2, and then you can get into our capital binge thing that we're doing at the higher tiers. But that's for someone whose death drive is fully into this, and they probably just have insane amounts of disposable time energy to pump into this thing. And so fuck yeah, get into it if you can. But that's it. Thank you everybody for joining. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care.